Hello, I'm Joe, and this is Sierra Specialty Auto. Welcome back to the shop. A while back I was setting up to do a job with the rotary table that I recently acquired. When I decided I did not like the way it felt, I dug into it a little bit. Let's go over to the roll-around cart and pick up about where I figured out what was going on. As I was working on the setup on the milling machine, I decided that I was not particularly happy with the way the rotary table was working. It just didn't have a good feel. So I decided to take it apart, and when I got inside, it it was so bad. I thought maybe you people might like to come along for this ride. So here we start here with the table. It's held on by 4 screws. I think you can see the holes here. Here's the screws. Underneath that is a flanged bolt or stud which holds the gear in place. But the big issue here is the tremendous amount of trash. Let me see if I can get you closer. And this is, Mr. Pete would identify this instantly. This is the result of people blowing chips off of the mill table with an air gun. And it gets up through the T-slots, works its way up here, and gets all over everything up here. So this whole thing, this is just a horrible mess. So I am going to complete the teardown of this. I'm going to strip it all the way, every nut and bolt, and clean everything, lubricate, and after I get everything clean, I'll come back and we'll put it back together. I have all my bits and pieces from the rotary table cleaned. One thing I want to do first, this casting which secures the end of the shaft right here, is held down with a couple of 1/4-inch cap screws. They were installed through a pair of internal tooth lock washers, which have taken a conical shape since the hole in this bracket is much larger than the screw. That is no doubt to allow for some adjustment of this bracket, but this needs to be fixed in a reliable manner. I'm going to take this to the milling machine. I'm going to mill a flat in the rough casting around each hole. I'm going to use an SAE lock washer to set on that flat spot, and then a regular split lock washer to provide the retaining tension, so that this can actually be slid around and adjusted. With this arrangement, with the cap screw and the internal tooth lock washer, it just ended up centering up in that hole, which is obviously not going to work right. These holes aren't even round. They look almost like they're as cast holes. So I'm going to address that and be right back. Okay, now we have flat surfaces on there. I just took about maybe 0.008 of an inch or so, a little less on this one than this one, just enough to get it flat so that a washer will slide smoothly on that surface. So that goes tight to this surface here. And there's a little set screw coming in from the side to adjust this back and forth for good mesh on the wheel. So I'm going to start with a little bit of lubrication on here. I'm going to my old can of Lubriplate. I looked online for recommendations on lubrication for rotary tables. Most of what I found refers to oil-filled tables. This is not. But I couldn't find any really consistent recommendations for more simple tables like this little Palmgren. So I'm just going to go with the old Lubriplate, and not much of it. Just a thin wipe in the bearing areas. Get this in first. Let's see, we want to put the wheel on here first. The worm wheel. The worm wheel wants to go like so, handle up and burr down. Okay, and then that will mesh properly with the worm when it gets there. Looks like that worm may have to go, or the big wheel may have to go in first, and then this follows. That's, yeah, I think it did come off in that direction. Okay, no problem. Let's just go after that. This is a sliding surface here, and the bore slides. And this is the retaining nut to hold it down. A thin wipe of grease on here, which will be this surface in here. I do not have a proper spanner, so I'm going to fake it with a couple of punches that are pretty fair fit in the holes. And cinch it up in this manner. Whoop. Doesn't take any more than that, and that's sliding freely. Now I'm finding myself wishing very much that I had a pair of precision flat stones. Those are going a little higher on my list. Stephen Lang, if you're listening, my birthday's coming up. So let's get a little more grease on the radio gear. Don't think I want a whole lot on here. There wasn't a whole lot when I took it apart. I'm going to try to avoid blowing chips into here, as Mr. Pete would recommend. All right, now let's try this again. Find the burr. There's the burr. The other side goes up. And this comes in. I'm thinking that's going to be pretty good. Now we're looking for the pin. And it was about flush. So I'll take this punch and take it good and tight. It's maybe I'll take it a little bit farther. That's good. It's very snug. Another dab of grease here. And we'll work this in. Well, maybe I should have worked that in first. I'm going to have to loosen that adjuster screw. All right, let that in. In fact, I'm already ahead of myself. I've got another part to get in here. Actually, two more parts to get in here. We have fiber washers, and one wants to go between the worm and the bronze bearing, and one wants to go following the bronze bearing. All right, now I can put these cap screws in. Get them gently started, and now we have a double nut arrangement on the end of the worm, the worm shaft, to adjust end play. So we want that snug. Want a little bit of end play, but darn little. So I'll need to get another wrench here. Get out the old bicycle wrenches. See if I can do it with this. There's 1/2. Let's hold the inner nut with the thin wrench and tighten with the bigger wrench on the outer nut. Okay, now my end play is coming from this adjustment. That's loose. I think I'm about perfect on the shaft. So we have to run this adjuster out to take this bronze bearing and adjust the lash on the gears. And that's too much, obviously. Let's go all the way around. That's a little stiff. Maybe I want to wedge just a tiny bit there as I tighten this. See if that does anything. I think that's it. Absolutely minimal backlash, but this goes smoothly all the way around. Let's buy that. I'm happy with it. Now then, these clamps go on here, the locking clamps, before we get too much farther. Now we're at a point that may take more trial and error. On top of the rotating gear, when I took it apart, there were shims. This is appears to be a plastic film. It's 3/1000 of an inch thick, and there were 4 pieces laying on here in, well, that one broke. It's a material that has taken it's gotten brittle. It was laying on here like so, the 4 of them, to space the table off of the gear by that much to, I'm assuming, to allow clearance around here. Well, I'm going to go ahead and dope this up with a thin wipe of grease here. I've used whey oil in this sort of application on other tooling, and it seems to have too much film shear or stiction. It didn't end up leaving a good feel on the mechanism. Had to fight too hard to overcome the stiction. So let's try this. We have alignment pins here and here that need to mate here and here. And there is a witness mark here and here, and I'm going to line up. Now this one, man, again, I really wish I had some precision ground flat stones. This one has been ground flat or filed flat, and this one hangs out in empty space, so that should not be an issue. Let's drop this on here and see what happens. So far, so good. Now let's put the cap screws in and see if it binds up when the cap screws come tight. That'll be the final determinant as to whether those shims or similar have to go back in there. So far, so good. I'm thinking I like that. And I get in here with a little longer handle. That was pretty good. That's fine. Not working on the flywheel of a big truck here. We don't need a whole lot of torque. That's fine again. And this feels tremendously better than it did when I started. Much less backlash, smooth all the way around, free and easy. I like it. Okay, let's wrap this quick fix up. Go put this on the milling machine. That was a pretty ugly mess, but it is satisfying to be able to identify a problem with a piece of tooling like that and get it cleaned up and tuned up, functioning properly. That was enjoyable for me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already subscribed, I hope you'll consider it. And I hope you'll come back and visit the shop again. Thank you for watching.